morning, you're watching the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. After discussions in Muscat, UN Special Envoy to Yemen says they are closer to ceasefire agreement and activation of Peace Coordination Committee. Oman oil breaks the barrier of $50 for the first time this year. And Oman and Southeast Asia Conference in Malaysia recommends establishing 2 centers for Omani studies and scientific researches. Those were the headlines, and now for the news in detail. UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Ismail Wild Sheikh Ahmed, said that an agreement of ceasefire for 72 hours, which could be extended in addition to the activation of a peaceful coordination committee, will be announced in the upcoming days. In a statement to Oman News Agency, the UN Special Envoy said that he will pay a visit to Saudi Arabia to meet Yemeni President Abd Rabbuh Mansour Hadi to coordinate for entering implementation of ceasefire. Wild Sheikh added that the real paper for UN plan for solving the Yemeni case is expected during the next 2 weeks' discussion. UN Special Envoy for Yemen said that Ansarullah and Mu'tamar Yemeni Party are convinced with the necessity of ceasefire and agreed on activating Peace and Coordination Committee. They are also ready to contribute in the work of the committee, pointing out that it is most positive point during his discussions in the Sultanate. Ismail Wild Sheikh stressed that the discussion of the real paper for the peaceful plan for Yemen that will become a work plan to reach a comprehensive peace still needs some consultations, pointing out that at present the agreement elements are to be refined for security issues that are required for the withdrawal and handover of weapons. Oman oil price December delivery reached $50 and 12 cents. Dubai Mercantile Exchange said that the price of Oman oil rose $1.15 from the price of yesterday, which was $48.93. The average price of Oman oil October delivery 2016 has stabilized at $44 and 2 cents, thus 62 cents per barrel higher than September delivery 2016. At the conclusion of its works at the Malaysian capital city Kuala Lumpur, the 3rd Scientific Conference, Oman and Southeast Asian Nations and China recommended establishing a center for Omani studies concerned with cultural, economic and civilization horizons of the Sultanate. The conference also recommended establishing Omani centers for scientific and cultural researches at Southeast Asian nations, China and Japan. It as well recommended the necessity of conducting studies on how these nations accepted Omani traditions and culture into their society. A number of work papers presented in the conference praised the role of the Sultanate in supporting peace on the regional and international level. Therefore, the conference recommends to include Omani experience in spreading tolerance and peace as a study in the curricula in various educational institutions in Southeast Asian nations. Efforts by Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos to end 5 decades of war in his country were recognized with the Nobel Peace Prize today. The committee chairwoman said the Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2016 to Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos for his resolute efforts to bring the country's more than 50-year-long civil war to an end. She said there is a real danger that the peace process will come to a halt and that civil war will flare up again. This makes it even more important that the parties headed by President Santos and rebel leader Rodrigo Londono continue to respect the ceasefire. The Colombian peace process had been seen as a possible winner of the prestigious prize, but experts had suggested that its chances went up in smoke after voters' rejection of the peace deal.
Major challenges such
The UN's Syria envoy today warned that Aleppo faces total destruction as government forces made their biggest gains in years against rebels inside the opposition-held part of the battleground city. Staffan de Mistura said eastern Aleppo could be totally destroyed by year's end and called on the government to halt strikes if fighters left the city. The envoy warned eastern Aleppo risked joining the ranks of the 20th century's worst tragedies, making comparisons to Srebrenica massacre and Rwandan genocide. His plea comes 2 weeks into an all-out government assault on opposition parts of Aleppo following the collapse of a short-lived truce negotiated by Russia and the United States. Syria's army and allies clashed today in the south of Aleppo with rebels seeking to oust President Bashar al-Assad, part of a pro-government offensive to retake Syria's once largest city. A military source said the fighting was concentrated in Sheikh Said, a rebel-held district of the city next to Ramusa, where the most intense battles earlier this summer took place. But there were conflicting accounts of whether the army made any gains. Airstrikes on rebel-held eastern Aleppo by the Syrian military and Russian jets remained significantly lighter than during the previous 2 weeks, following an army announcement on Wednesday that it would lessen its bombardment. A Syrian military source said today morning that the army had captured several important positions on Sheikh Said's hilltop, but rebels said later that all gains had been reversed and that insurgents still held the area. The head of the UN agency that polices Iran's side of the deal has said the implementation of a landmark nuclear agreement between Iran and world powers is still fragile, warning that small mistakes could have grave consequences. Iran and 6 major powers, including the United States, struck the agreement last year. It restricts Tehran's nuclear activities in exchange for the lifting of international sanctions. Yukiya Amano said today before a trip to Germany that the implementation of the agreement is still fragile. Amano's agency has reported that Iran so far has stayed within the terms of the agreement. Those include limits on its stockpile of enriched uranium and the number of its centrifuges machines that enrich uranium it has installed. Iran has also complained that the United States is not keeping its side of the deal. It wants Washington to do more to encourage banks to do business with Iran. Many are wary that doing so would run afoul of US sanctions still in place. Hurricane Matthew edged ever closer to Florida today with torrential rains and up to 120-mile-an-hour winds after a blast through the Caribbean that reportedly left more than 300 dead in Haiti. Matthew was downgraded to a Category 3 storm earlier today by the National Hurricane Center as its wind speed dropped slightly, but Florida still faced its most dangerous hurricane in living memory. The storm was expected to strike the coast sometime today, although it was not clear if it will be a direct hit or more of a side-sweeping blow, which could still be catastrophic. Over the course of the day, Matthew could scour its way up to 600-mile strip of coast from Boca Raton in Florida to just north of Charleston, South Carolina, driving seawater and heavy rain inland. Still to come in our news bulletin. On the World Elderly Day, the Directorate General of Health Services in the Governorate of Dakhiliya organises an exhibition for the elderly. Welcome back to the news from the Sultanate of Oman Television. Within its activities and cultural programs, Omani Society for Writers and Literates branch in the Governorate of Brahmi organised a cultural seminar. The seminar was attended by a number of writers, intellectuals and researchers who presented 4 work papers on civilizational, cultural and literary aspects in the Governorate. The seminar work papers highlighted the geological and topographical characteristics of the Governorate of Brahmi. They as well shed light on urban and civilizational features in the Governorate. Coinciding with the celebration of World Elderly Day, the Directorate General of Health Services in the Governorate of Dakhiliya organised an awareness exhibition entitled "Caring About Them is the Responsibility of Individual and Society." The exhibition aimed at introducing health and social services rendered to the elderly. It witnessed the participation of various health institutions and civil associations concerned with the elderly. The exhibition highlighted the role and efforts exerted by Omani Association for Elderly Friends in supporting this segment. The Directorate also conducted comprehensive checkups for the elderly, in addition to organising physiotherapy services. In the Governorate of South Sharqiya, a campaign was inaugurated with wide social participation from various segments in the society. The campaign aimed to minimise the phenomenon of incorrect ways of getting rid of construction wastes resulted from new projects and renovation works. It also aimed to encourage initiatives and innovations in the field of managing and waste separation. The Walaya of Qasab witnessed moderate to heavy rains this afternoon that caused a number of wadis and tributaries to overflow. The rain centered in the mountains of the Walaya in Al Sayi village, which caused the wadis to overflow, and the flowing water reached the dam in the Walaya. And now for the general weather forecast around the Sultanate. Partly cloudy skies will prevail over most of the governorates, with chances of scattered rains on the Dhofar, Worcester and coasts overlooking the Sea of Oman. Cloud accumulation and scattered rains are expected over Hajar Mountains. Winds will be northeasterly light to moderate over the coasts of Sea of Oman, while on coasts of the Arabian Sea it will be southwesterly light to moderate. Seas will be moderate along the coasts of Arabian Sea with a maximum wave height of 2 meters. Rest of the coast it will be slight with a maximum wave height of 1 meter. The Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. After discussions in Muscat, UN Special Envoy for Yemen says they are closer to a ceasefire agreement and activation of a peace coordination committee. Oman Oil breaks the barrier of $50 for the first time this year. And Oman and Southeast Asia Conference in Malaysia recommends establishing 2 centres for Omani studies and scientific researchers. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsroom and the studios, it's good night.